Hello and welcome to the final session of the NPC Virtual Annual Conference. I am Ron Douglas, National President, NPC. This morning I will be chairing the discussion that is close to our hearts. Generations Unite, Bridging the Gap, the Age Gap. Uniting the generations is very important to the NPC members. Many of us are parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents. We value our young people and want to build a better understanding between us. But today, there seems to be a wide gulf between the ages. Traditional family groups and bonds are not what they were, and the old are often isolated in community, housings, or homes. To discuss the issues involved, the NPC is delighted to welcome an excellent panel of guest speakers, including Denise Burke, Judith Hurwitz, James Lynch, and Joy France. First, I'd like to introduce Jonathan, who will be managing the webinar to explain the format. Jonathan, please.
Hi all, I'm Jonathan Safer, along with Bev Morrison, the NPC Campaign Officer. We'll be hosting our final webinar of the series. If you do have any questions that you'd like to put to our panelists, please use the Q&A function. You should find it at the bottom of your screen. Just type your question and we'll try and get round to answering them throughout the webinar. After each speaker has spoken, Jan Short, General Secretary, will be putting some questions to the speakers. If we don't get round to answering your questions, apologies, but we will try our best to do so. Ron, back to you.
Thanks very much, Jonathan. Now I would like to welcome our first speaker today, Denise Burke, Unite of All Ages. This is a social initiative that brings together young and old to fight isolation, loneliness, and age segregation. Denise has a long career in the childcare and family care sector and was a founder and a director of the Good Care Guide. She is committed to effective positive change for fresh policy development. Please welcome Denise Burke. Denise, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ron, and thank you for inviting me here today. Jonathan, if I can have, you can probably slip to the next slide, I think, even after this one. So in today's presentation, I really want to give you a little snippet about what United for All Ages is all about, talk about the growth in intergenerational activities, why the benefits of mixing for all ages, what our sliding scale is, interaction and examples of some of the projects we've worked on, the impact of COVID and how that has created some challenges, where we're going next, ideas and directions post-COVID-19, and making it happen in every community. Next slide, please, Jonathan. So this first picture I want to share with you, I think just sums up the joy, the laughter. This is the Together project. This is where mums and tots go and visit into care homes, into extended care facilities, social housing, and the sheer delight on this lady's face and the little boy enjoying himself, I think says it all. Next slide, Jonathan, please. Now this one is an organisation called In Common, and this is primary age children, and this is where they're going into sheltered housing and the residents in the shuttleed housing are actually talking about local history with the children, and this is a weekly visit. Next slide, Jonathan, please. Now, this is one that you're going to hear from Judith later, but this is one that Judith will very much recognise. This is hard to believe that this is a play area in a care home. And this is Apples and Honey Nightingale, which Judith is going to talk to you about later. Next slide, Jonathan. Now, this again is at Apples and Honey Nightingale, but what I want to just emphasize with this photo, this was on the opening day that my husband and I were delighted that we were invited to. But if you just look within the hoop, and you'll see older people and you'll see young children, but look at the people outside that hoop. There are all ages there. There are sons, daughters, a whole range of ages. So when we talk about intergenerational, we don't just mean young and old. Next slide, Jonathan, please. So what is United for All Ages? Well, we're a social enterprise and think, do tank. So that really means that we try and put in practice what we preach, and we run a consultancy through United for All Ages. We promote intergenerational interaction and support the development of new and existing projects. We coordinate the intergenerational housing network, which has been incredibly successful. And it was founded by my husband, Stephen, and myself back in 2010, when we decided, having both sort of come to the end of our, if you like, career number ones, living in London, we decided to move to North Norfolk, and we founded United for All Ages. My background, as you've heard Ron say earlier, is in childcare and early years, and I consult to providers and investors. Stephen has a childcare and elder care background, housing and health, and public and not-for-profit leadership. Next slide, please, Jonathan. So where were we pre-COVID? Well, it's hard to think back, isn't it, to those pre-COVID days. But pre-COVID, there was a huge growth in intergenerational projects in their profile, huge media coverage, lots going on social media. It was seen as the right thing to do. It was very much grassroots led, not government led. But a lot of that then had to be boosted by mutual aid during COVID-19. It goes way, way beyond just care homes, nurseries and schools. We're talking about within all communities. And as it says on the next bit, intergenerational housing and communities. And we've moved from looking elsewhere in the world for examples to seeing the UK leading the way. And what I mean by that is pre-2010, Stephen and I were visiting many countries abroad and seeing intergenerational activities. We were seeing examples shown on the internet of how it was working so beautifully. And from 2010 onwards, we did then start to see a huge impact and people becoming more and more interested in intergenerational activities. Next slide, please. So why are intergenerational activities so important? Well, Britain is one of the most age segregated countries. If you look around, services and communities are often siloed by age. and families are increasingly fragmented. If we think, I can think back to my mum's generation. My mum is now 92. She lived, when I was a young child, opposite my grandmother. We had aunts and uncles around us. That is completely different now. That extended family is no longer living close to family. So increasingly fragmented. And what we do know is that segregation of the ages, there's a lack of connection and trust, and that drives division. So children and young people and older people face crises, and the care, childcare, health communities are in crisis, and that's often because of that segregation. Next slide, Jonathan, please. So what are the mutual benefits of mixing? Well, if I just took you back to that first slide, just seeing the joy it gives when you mix the age ranges. We know that from this morning. I collected my 4-year-old grandson from nursery last night, and he decided he wanted a sleepover with Nonna and Grandpa. And so we had to ring up his mum and dad and tell him that he was going to be sleeping overnight with us. And he had a wonderful time with Stephen, my husband, watching the football last night. Stephen explaining to him how to explain to a 4-year-old the rules of football. But those benefits are enormous. We get that from our own families. The confidence and communication, the skills and opportunities, and Judith will talk about this when she speaks later. We often have more than 2 generations living together now. We will have great grandparents, grandparents, and children. For providers, whether that's providers of early years and childcare, elder care provision, providers are beginning to see the USP that having, say, a nursery co-located or on the site of a care home brings. Let's be honest, most elder care and childcare providers want to offer a USP to enable, to market, if you like, their offer. And having this mix of generations on one site is and can often be that USP. For staff, it helps with recruitment and retention, and indeed career development. If you've got staff working in a care home that are working quite unsociable hours, to have a nursery on that same site is a wonderful provision for those care workers to use for their own children, and it can be cross-subsidised, so it's a win-win for both, really. With better services and facilities, we can build a stronger community. And I think what's important, the regulators now are really beginning to understand the quality of learning and care. And if we think in the early years sector, we have Ofsted, the regulator, CQC in elder care, and even the regulators are coming together and understanding and are less, let's say, I won't say obstructive, are put less barriers up when we start talking about mixing the age ranges together. And of course, we've got a lot going on with intergenerational research. Jonathan, next one, please. So when we talk about a sliding scale of intergenerational interaction, so things go from, as we saw in that first picture with the Together project, where you have mums, tots, carers taking young children into either residential housing or a care home. And those are either often organised by faith communities, they're often seasonal. Then we might have regular weekly, fortnightly visits and activities that are all pre-arranged. And then we have co-located or adjacent facilities. We have the version that Judy's going to talk about, where we've got a nursery on the site of a care home. But equally, we've come across since 2010 so many care homes that just happen to be in the same street or side by side with a care home. And it's often just been a case of taking down a couple of fences and basically you've got a co-located site. Intergenerational housing or multi-purpose schemes, I like to call them like the jam sandwich. So as housing is being developed now, we might have the top layer of a building which is providing homes for young people. We might have ground floor where those facilities are homes for older people. And in the middle section, you've got where intergenerational activities can take place together, whether that be cooking, socializing, whatever. And a lot of local authorities now are very much taking a strategic approach to communities for all ages. If we look at a lot of neighbourhood plans that are now being written in localities, they talk about communities for all ages. And every organisation can be somewhere on this sliding scale. There certainly isn't just one model, and one model doesn't fit all. But there's just as many different examples of shared interest as concerns of bringing people together. Next slide. So we've got some community exemplars, individuals where you've got multi-generational households. We talked about that, where you may have all generations of one family living together. We've got home share very much where older people living in their own homes may have a spare room, are then letting that property to a student or a young professional. And for a very peppercorn rent, that younger person then is providing the social interaction, they're doing the shopping, they may be helping with the gardening. Older people's care homes and housing schemes linked with nurseries, schools and parent and toddler groups. Care homes sharing space with childminders, fantastic example in Torbay where a care home actually utilises some of its space for the local childminders to set up on a daily basis. Then we've got nurseries that are adjacent to care homes. A beautiful example, an Anchor care home next to a nursery in Chichester. We've got sheltered housing, extra care housing, examples in Hull and Haringey, and Peterborough, where my 92-year-old mum is, which is a great example. We've got integrated shared sites or centres for all ages that are often new builds, but we've also got existing sites. We've got the example of Apples and Honey at Nightingale. We've got new provision happening in Wigan and Chester. And then we've got multi-purpose centres and sites, indeed villages happening in Fife and Wilton, not far from Salisbury, and local authorities that have got an all ages approach. So there are some really, really good examples out there. Next slide, please. So this is an example, you probably can't see it too well, but this is the site that's in part development up in Wigan. And it's probably difficult to see on here. You'll probably see it better if then when you if you look at this and catch up. But this has got a community space, it's got assisted living, it's got a specialised care, nursing care unit. There's a cafe, there's a nursery, all within woodland and all surrounded by a beautiful lake. So fantastic facilities that are in development. Next slide. And this is the one which is happening, supported by the army actually. This is in Wilton outside Salisbury, which is providing accommodation for veterans. But again, has a community cafe, an enterprise hub, we'll have a nursery on site, again, in development, and this will be absolutely superb. Jonathan, next one. Now, this one is a new building. This again is just a mock-up, although it looks real. This is an architect's illustration. This is a new building in Bermondsey, almshouses created by United Saviours in a low income area. And this is providing, if we look at the front of the building, so all of the windows is accommodation, but then on that bottom level in the glassed area, they're all shared space for intergenerational community activities. And the next slide, Jonathan. So what else is happening? So we've got, on the Isle of Wight, we've got school classrooms that are actually set up in care homes. So exciting. We've got elder care services that are happening in schools. So we've got examples in Redbridge and North East London. We've got football foundations that are doing great stuff, communities for all ages. Liverpool, Cardiff, and my beloved Brentford. Stephen and I are huge Brentford supporters. Colleges where they're actually training elder care and childcare workers, and that's a real win-win, because we're looking then at qualifications that can see people working across the two dimensions. Student hubs, community volunteering, linkages. We've got intergenerational coordinators happening in Gwynedd and York, and we've got co-located share spaces and housing, emptying high streets. As we all know, our high streets have been decimated, but these are huge opportunities now for local authorities to think of additional co-located share spaces and housing. Next one. And this is, we talked about Redbridge, and this is actually a picture here of Downsville Primary, and older people now are referred now by social services if they are deemed to be incredibly lonely, and actually what they need is some interaction, and this is them going into Downsville Primary. Where they can meet with young children, they can participate in supporting lessons, etc. I mean, we have to remember all of this in the context of COVID restrictions, but there's no reason why lots of these facilities can't start again. Jonathan, next one. So we've had to be creative during COVID. Social distancing has really tested creativity and the mixing, and that has led of new ways to bring generations together. Not the same as meeting face to face, but obviously online, Zooms, videos, quizzes, music, and telephone befriending, which has been incredibly popular. On paper, a lot of young children, a lot of school children, have been providing art and poems, letters and cards to those very same people that they were previously meeting in care homes, etc. And we've been able to start up some more outdoor activities now, so music and singing and gardening, all the kind of things that you can do in small bubbles in the outdoors. Still a major challenge, particularly developing new relationships and moving beyond one-to-one groups at this time. But I think we all have to remain positive that we're coming out of this. Jonathan, next one. So beyond COVID, planning the social recovery. So our ambition is that every child, every older person, the family, the community, we would love to see 1,000 of these intergenerational centres for all ages across the UK by 2030, a huge ambition. The more evaluation that we can have, we talk about location, we talk here about evaluation. The more we can demonstrate the impact, the benefits, the outcomes of intergenerational activities, the more likely we are to secure funding and investment for a long-term approach. So strategic approaches at all levels of government. We need champions. There are a lot of you champions out there. We have to continue. We have to shout from grassroots level, and we want to get this mainstreamed to link all key agendas. And we really do have to think big, and we have to create a Britain for all ages. And I think that is probably my last slide, Jonathan. Well, apart from just some pictures here where I think, again, they just show what beautiful activities can happen. So just keep in touch, you know, our details are there. My email contact is there. Have a look at the website. There's lots and lots of news, resources, events, consultancy. We like to share progress, lessons and ideas on our website. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Denise. Very comprehensive report and a lot of detail there for people to take in. But I'd like to introduce Jan Short now, General Secretary, to put the questions from the online panel. Thank you.
Morning, everybody. We've got quite a lot of questions, but I don't think we're going to have time for all of them. So I think we'll start and see where we can go. Ron, keep me on time. A question from Louisa Denise, and this is something probably you may have come across in the way that you need to work. And she's asking, how do you bridge the gap in families where there are divorced and where grandparents are denied access? If I give you one or two, and then,
yeah, give me one or two.
And a question is, do you encounter ageism of any kind in your work? And the third one is around multi-generational housing. And we know that we've had examples of this in the past, and it's not worked because older people like their peace and quiet. So Ralph is asking how in your systems and how in your projects, how's that dealt with? So those three will do for now, Denise.
Okay. Well, I'm not so sure that I am going to be able to answer this first one. I mean, the bridging the gap where you've got divorced families and no access to grandchildren, it's a very difficult one, and it's a very sad one, but it is often the case, I have to say. The work that Stephen and I do, yes, of course, we hear about it, but it's not something that I have the answers for, really. I think, you know, the only thing I can say is I kind of guess you've got to start with trying to build those relationships and talking these things through. So there is no simple answer, and it's not something that United for All Ages, we don't see that as part of our core work, I suppose, Jan.
Okay.
Do we encounter ageism in our work? Yes, of course we do. You know, we're not sort of Teflon coated. This ageism comes up in all different ways. It comes up even if you think, if you haven't necessarily got an architect that you may be working with to develop a new site with. They can be very fixed in their ways, because actually designing buildings or facilities that are going to work for all ages does not come naturally, and therefore we have to work with them, explain, you know, how you make it work. So yes, and we also get criticized. I would like to say from both sides, really, whether it's young people or actually older people as well, who can sometimes be quite critical about what we're suggesting about bringing the generations together. And Ralph, to talk about multi-generational housing, it's not going to work for everybody, you know. Some people do like their peace and quiet and quite like the living on their own, but I have to say that if you're open-minded, if you've been a family orientated individual all of your life, and then you lose those that are very close to you, and you lose that extended family around you, then often multi-generational housing, home share, will appeal to you. But as I think I said earlier in the presentation, one size does not fit all, and we would never impose you know, multi-generational housing as an option for everybody.
Thanks, Denise. Have I got time for 2 more quick questions, Ron?
Yeah, go on quickly.
Yeah. Are the activities that you are talking about, are they funded, and how are they funded? Is there a contribution expected from people who participate? And from Ingrid, she would like to know, how do pensioners who live on their own and who are more likely to be isolated not fall through the net? How do they access services if nobody knows about them?
Okay, so how are activities funded? So again, as we talked about that sliding scale of activities, there's a sort of a sliding scale of acceptance of how things either have to be funded or there's no requirements for funding. If we're thinking of where we've got a co-located nursery and care home on the one site, you know, the nursery is obviously funded because of parental fees. The interaction is very much just organised between the care home and the nursery. So there is no additional funding required. Most care homes will have an activity organiser, or good care homes will. And therefore, it's just a case of the nursery liaising with that individual of working out what the appropriate activities will be. And I'm sure Judith will talk to us about what those activities can be. With schools where they're inviting individuals in, you know, the schools are just incredibly grateful for having that volunteering coming into their schools. So again, there's no charge. The parent and toddler groups that go into care homes, we often find that what they will do is, as an activity themselves, those mums and tots may make some sort of contribution, I don't know, 20, 50p to cover things like tea and coffee, but there is no further cost. So it's, and yes, there is funding to be bid for out there, but it is depending on the version of that activity that is happening. There is often little or no cost associated. And then the reaching out one, well, I have to say that the very people that you are always trying to reach out to, the most hard to reach out to, are the ones that are often incredibly lonely. And I think the way we talk about it is that within that local community, one has to hope that there are either faith groups or community groups or referrals from social services that would try and engage with that individual.
Sorry, the sound's not on.
Is my sound not on?
Yeah, I can hear you.
For a little while, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, somebody was saying there's no sound, so
We've got you now.
all right. Is that all right then, Jan?
Yeah, just one more question very quickly.
Yes.
Do you have an advisory role? Do you have kind of, I guess, help sessions, you know, little pop-up shops and things like that? I'm thinking of the pensioners who do live alone and are not on the internet and would never know about you. So how do you kind of get around that?
Yes, I mean, to obviously be able to access our website and sort of see things that are going on, you're going to have to be able to access the internet, just as anybody is going to have to access the internet to actually have access to what we're doing today. We do promote ourselves in other ways, and we're more than happy for anybody to pick up the phone. I had a call from a gentleman yesterday who what we're not, and I should emphasize, you know, we're not a befriending service. So what we can't do, we can't be at the end of the phone just to talk through somebody who is potentially feeling lonely. But what we would do is then signpost that individual to organisations that could then help them further.
Okay, thank you. And we've still got lots of questions, and I'm sure we'll get a lot more, but we need to move on. So hopefully if you can stay behind, if we've got a little bit of time after my presentation, we might be able to.
Yeah, and also the other answer would be perhaps for Jonathan or somebody to compile those questions, and then I can answer them at a later date in writing and feed them back to you.
Yeah, that would be good. That's what we normally do. Thank you, Denise.
Okay, thanks very much, Denise.
Thanks, Ron.
The next presentation is from Judith Horizon, the founder of Apple and Honey Nightingale Nursery. Judith has been a long, passionate advocate of a multi-generational living and learning. She has a distinguished career as an editor of the award and was awarded the MBE in 2011 for the service to the early year education. Judith saw the benefits of bringing old and young together when in her nursery, Apple and Honey visited Nightingale House Care Home regular for many years. Please welcome Judith. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your warm welcome, and I'm delighted to be able to share a little bit of my journey and about the vision of Apples and Honey Nightingale with you, and also the impact it has made. That, as I've often thought, I couldn't have expected or believed it would be as amazing as it really is, to be able to see and to facilitate the opportunities of the residents at Nightingale House and the children at Apples and Honey Nightingale to come together and have daily intergenerational activities. So I opened my nursery, Apples and Honey, in 1991, an awfully long time ago. Things were very different then. The only thing I had to check was that there were protectors on the plug sockets. It's not like Ofsted now. But gradually, as our program developed, I realized that what I was wanting to provide for the children was really a complete education, a complete way of living. And you can't do that if you're in a silo of just children or even young families. We needed to experience, learn from, enjoy, and be with all the generations. Now, Apples and Honey in Wimbledon is actually a Jewish faith-based nursery. Our curriculum is around the cycle of the Jewish year, but we are open to children and families of all faiths and cultures and no faiths. But it was the only one in South London, and there was only one Jewish care home in South London, and that was Nightingale House. So I contacted Nightingale House and said, could we come and visit? And initially, we planned our visits around a festival. It was very much more performance related, a bit like Christmas shows and Hanukkah shows. But as we watched the interactions and the relationships growing, the program grew. And until one day, I approached the home and said, would it be possible to actually open a nursery on site? There were many motivations around trying to do this. And in one of the first slides I'm going to show you, actually, maybe I'll show you that now, and then you'll be able to understand what really pushed me to make that first approach. So if you'll just bear with me a minute, I'm going to see how successfully I managed to share this with you. Let's see. 1 minute. Aha, can you see it?
Yeah, we can see.
Thank you. And I just want to make sure, 1 minute, that I can see you as well. There we are. Now I can see you too. Thank you. So moving to the slide I wanted to show you. This little girl here is called Evie. On one of our visits, we were in the craft room, the activities room, and Evie came a little bit late with her mum, and we turned around and we saw her talking to this lady here. They were very engrossed with each other, but we said goodbye. They'd come a bit late. It was time to go back to the nursery. The following week, I was handed an envelope from the home and asked to present this to little Evie. Evie, by the way, comes from an international family. Her parents are American, and she was here living in England, not having regular contact with her grandparents or her great-grandparents. I handed the envelope over to her mum, and they opened it. And this was what was inside. Dear Evie, I'm sending you a photo of me because I used to be called Evie. You are the nice young Evie, and I loved meeting you the other day at Nightingale House. I loved talking to you. I hope you will visit us again soon. This is Eve. And it turned out that not only did Evie and Eve have the same name, they had the same surname. But one was from England and one was from America. And Eve, this Eve, who'd grown up and was now in the care home, had never had children. She had been she'd come over with a kinder transport, actually, in the war. And here was a relationship that blossomed. The family used to visit her outside of nursery hours. They created a special relationship. And in that first picture here, you can see Evie is opening up the piece of pottery that it's a little treasure box that Eve had made for her. And here she's getting a hug from Eve after having given Eve a card that she had made specially for her. It's hard to actually put in words just quite what the impact is and how varied the program can be. And I think that the best way to find out is to actually see it in action. So I'm going to show you a short video clip that was taken by someone from the Independent who visited us.
It's been a big move for me, a terrific move for me. So having the children has been lovely. She came in today and she came straight to me and she said, "Hello, Anna." And she sees me every Monday morning. Martha, who's 3, and I'm 93. So, can you imagine looking at a 93-year-old and still saying hello? Very good, very good. I never had children of my own, and I've been out of all my working life. I haven't been here, so I haven't even had my sister's family, so this is like being completely reborn. Well, not only do you have the friendship of the children, you know, because after a time, there's recognition, they recognize you, you know. And it's almost like, you know, having a visit from lovely friends, lovely young friends.
Just let your hooves go, click the teacup, your tail goes swish, and your wheels go round.
I think it's a very good idea, because I think otherwise old people tend to get isolated. And the idea that, you know, that you can actually, you know, talk to children and have a very good relationship with them.
Do you look forward to it?
Oh yes, yes, it's good fun. And they seem to enjoy it too, yeah.
So let me give you a bit more context. Nightingale House, as it was, has actually combined with another care home and is now called Nightingale Hammerson. But at Nightingale House, the average age of the residents is 92 years old when they come into the home. It is a centre of excellence for dementia care and for end-of-life care. They have a very big focus, not just on person-centered care, but they've developed it into relationship-centered care, because actually without relationships, you feel like you have no place in the world. So I did feel very much like the cat that got the cream when I approached them in their beautiful grounds and asked them if we could actually open a nursery in their grounds. It was opened in 1906. It used to be called the Home for Aged Jews. Fortunately, they've changed the name. It's in very lovely grounds. It would have been outside, you know, the outskirts of London, but London has grown around it. A lot of the residents have not had the opportunity to have children. Many of them were born during those the war years when so many people were killed and they didn't have the chance to meet the person that they may have spent their life with. And for some, It's been their first opportunity of actually watching a baby develop, seeing how a child develops and watching them grow up. And we've benefited a great deal from the insights of many of the residents as they have observed the children and take such a sense of ownership and care around those children. As I said, Apples and Honey is a nursery. The nursery that I actually had was only sessional for 2 to 5 year olds, but Apples and Honey Nightingale is a daycare. And I noticed that one of the questions in the chat was asking about the hours. We fitted our hours very much around the hours of the care staff because it was very important that we would be a resource for the home. The home is a charity, so everything it does has to be for the benefits of the residents. And obviously for us, it's very important that all we do should benefit the children. And so neither the residents nor our children should be a tool for each other. They need to be of equally, they need to benefit equally, and it should be of equal value. And that really has turned out to be the case. When I approached the home, I had to justify why we would actually ask and be there. And we looked at the different benefits that we could offer. And I know that Denise has spoken about that already. Well, the children have benefited a great deal. It was obvious they would to us. I'll go into that in more detail soon. We knew the residents would benefit. We had seen it, we'd experienced it. I myself have had my husband's mother and grandmother were both at Nightingale House, and we saw the care they had and the impact of coming with our children to visit their grandma and great-grandma. But it's not just the residents and the children. The families of the residents have found that the knowledge that their loved ones are going to go into a place where, rather than them being put away in a home, which has that very negative connotation and makes people feel that they shouldn't be doing this, they knew when they realized what was happening, when we could share with them what we were doing, that this was like a new vibrant phase of their life, that there was going to be constant interaction, even if those, or if not interaction, at least impact. Because even those residents who are not taking part in the program can hear the laughter, can see the movement, can feel that this is a community within a community, and that they are still part of society. It's a new phase of their life rather than the end of their life. The care home staff obviously could benefit greatly because of us actually fitting our hours around them, but also the arrangement we made with Nightingale was that we would reserve 20% of our places for the children of the care staff at very subsidized rates, so that actually that helped with retention, helped with recruitment, just as Denise was saying. And for the nursery staff, many of whom themselves have extended family, but not living in this country, and who have been part of being an extended family, they love being in this multi-generational community. Everybody could benefit. But I know that Denise mentioned, she's talked about the benefits for the residents. So I want to just show how it can be of equal benefit for the children. I'll show you some pictures after, but I'm sure you saw there the smiling faces, the little girl watching, learning from one of the gentlemen what she should do in the exercises, the way that the children would run to create relationship and the interest they have. I've seen these children looking at the skin and asking about the difference between their skin and the skin of the residents. They learn that life is a cycle, that people do age, that it is not frightening, and they are part of that chain of life. I feel that we actually do preempt many mental health issues by giving children a very real experience of life and of death. I know that people often ask us, so I'm going to preempt the question, how do we deal with death at the nursery? Well, it doesn't have any meaning really for children because they can't understand that concept. They see it around them. We have always butterflies. We get caterpillars as part of our educational program. We watch them metamorphose. We see them become butterflies. We see them fly away, but we also see them die. The cycle of life is something they live with anyway. And we have not personally had any negative responses to the fact that some of our residents are no longer with us. Always the things that we do must conform with the early years foundation stage, which is the statutory guidance of the government. What the children have to learn, how they need to benefit developmentally, both cognitively and physically. We see that a lot of our programs work equally for the residents who actually need cognitive stimulation, they need physical therapeutic stimulation, and we work very closely with the therapist team at the home and with the engagement team and with all the care staff. There's so much more I could say, but I don't want to not show you some of the pictures which can actually illustrate some of the things that we do. Here, this is the baby and toddler group. You can see Margie there with the mum and the baby, 3 generations coming together in a group, and the joy that it brings out, you can see. Here, we're actually doing our numeracy classes together. Nigel is helping. Well, actually, I think here that the little girl is actually helping Nigel with his matching, helping him find a pair there. And it's lovely because I've often found, particularly with Nigel, who had the best sense of humor, that he would deliberately not manage to find a pair or make a mistake or get it wrong in order to give the children a second chance at learning something. He has become the teacher. He has purpose, and the children are gaining from his experience, just as they gain from his stories about life. This is part of our literacy program. It's fantastic to actually watch these children together. In many nurseries and in many schools, it's very hard to give that individual time, that individual attention that children need to develop. Parents are so busy. They often don't have time to listen to their children. They don't have time to sit with them in the same way as we would like them to. And here we have a whole pool of people with plenty of time on their hands who actually love to be there to share and to listen and to have that close contact with young children. Rini is an expert cook. I remember we did a workshop on making challah, the special Sabbath bread, and she came into the nursery to actually make the bread with us, she and her sister. And as we were doing it, I shared my recipe, I shared the message, and she turned around and said, "You're doing it wrong." And she told us the story about how when she grew up in the East End, they prepared their bread and they would take it to the communal bakery, the communal oven, to be baked every Friday, ready for the Shabbat, the Sabbath, starting that evening. And she and her sisters always made extra to go to the synagogue every week. And this story would never have happened if we wouldn't have heard it if it hadn't been for this opportunity together. We make lots of music together. Denise was talking about the different activities, the programs that we have and the research that's done. Live Music Now is doing research on the impact of music and of these sessions, both for the residents on their own and when they come together intergenerationally. I'm not sure I need to explain what's happening here, but you can see it's both inside and outside that we have the chance to be together. Now, I know that we talked that COVID has had an enormous impact on everything that we do. But at Nightingale and at Apples and Honey Nightingale, we have managed throughout the pandemic to keep our relationships going. When we were closed last spring, the parents at the nursery said, we can't let these relationships that have developed just disintegrate. We must continue them. We must find a way of keeping them going. So what they did was they actually made a video. They had each child in their own home doing a very small video, a little clip, which they put together. And we persuaded a couple of the staff at Nightingale to video some of the residents. On our website, you'll be able to see the video, but I didn't have time to show it you today. But they put it together and we were able to continue sending letters, and actually we shared that video with the home, but also with the families of the residents who themselves had not been able to come and were not able to come and see their loved ones. It made an enormous impact on their mental health and on their feelings of not being isolated and of not, and helped to diffuse some of the anxiety from the families as well. But as soon as we could actually come together, as soon as we were able to actually open again the nursery in person, we came together outside initially. And then in this picture, you can see how, although we aren't allowed to be together physically in the same room, we've managed to come together with two separate rooms adjoining, with one learning community, two perspectives. You can see it from both sides of the glass door. With that glass between us, we're still doing pottery together, we sing together, we've done exercise classes together. So when the sun's not shining and we can't be outside, socially distanced, doing things together, we've still been able to come together to do activities. And you can see here that this is where we have a bees and knees show, and the children are dressed up as honeybees.
Could you wind up, Judith, please?
Yes, I can certainly, because I just want to give the last slide, which is just some of the responses. One of our residents said, seeing the children and having them here has given me a reason to live, to keep going. I was very depressed before, I just wanted to die. Now that I see them here, I feel it encourages me to keep going, to keep trying. And a 4-year-old child said, do you want to come to my birthday party? Last week, we asked the children, and one of the children came up to the window and said, I love you, to all the group, all her friends. And the parents said, I describe Apples and Honey Nightingale as a place that can really make a childhood. I've wound up. Thank you for listening.
I think we might have lost Ron.
Ah.
Right, just before we carry on, I'm going to say, because this is such a huge discussion for us, and obviously from the chat, everybody is saying what an excellent thing this is and breaking down the barriers. We're going to add 15 minutes to our time, so don't worry, we won't cut you off at 12 o'clock. I know that you've been monitoring the chat yourself, Judith, but I've got a couple.
Oh, no, I haven't. Sorry. I've been looking, I've been talking.
All right. I've got a couple of things that are kind of in the way of the issues around safeguarding, yeah, and also about someone whose mother is 94, doesn't have any grandchildren because the person and her brother haven't had any children of their own. But before COVID, a friend was taking the grandchildren to visit their mother. Obviously, that's come to an end. And they're looking at how and who they might contact to actually get something like this off the ground where they live. So if you've got any immediate suggestions, and this lady was coming up to 94. There's a comment about the use of grandfriend and how it's a great new word in the English dictionary. So I think we should put that in ours too. I mean, grandfriend is It's really, really lovely. Right, so it's about, right. Yeah, so it's about the safeguarding. It's about how people can kind of maybe start looking for their own family needs and who they contact, probably you first, and find out where they live. But if you could answer those two questions, Judith, and then I think we can move on. Yeah.
As with everything, for safeguarding is very important. Everybody who's actually working in the care home is DBS'd. Everyone who works in the nursery is DBS. That means that they have they're vetted to prove and to show by there's a police check to check that they are safe to work with residents and with the children. But the responsibility for the children and for the safeguarding belongs to for the children, it belongs to the nursery, and this responsibility for the care home is that care home staff. It is the care home. They are not responsible for each other. And we have had no safeguarding issues, because if there's anybody that the home would be concerned about, then it is their responsibility to ensure that that person is safe and that they are not a risk to anybody else. And in the same way with the nursery, if we are concerned about a child, if we think a child's behavior may be a little bit risky, then it's our responsibility to ensure that they are not put in that position that they would be a risk to anybody else. But the children are amazingly perceptive and aware. We've had some very troubled children at the nursery who we've had to really monitor with the other children, but they would never harm one of the residents. And not because we've said they mustn't, but it just is their relationship with the residents is a very different. They see them in a different way, and it gives them an opportunity for themselves to become, as it were, more protective, more responsible, and actually build a different relationship. For me, everything that anybody does in both care homes and in nurseries, and in fact, in any of these social environments that are structured, will always be risk assessed. And if there is a risk, then you alleviate that risk, you ameliorate it. And if the risk's too great, you don't do it. But I would never not do something out of fear if I haven't done an assessment. And I think one of the problems in our society is that we often don't do something just in case because we're worried, and we don't give children, we don't give people the option of being responsible and give them the choice, the chances that they could have by finding ways of making things safe. I hope that answers the question. When it comes to getting building relationships, I wasn't quite clear. Most homes now are opening up to an essential care plan, that someone from outside of the care home, who it doesn't have to be a relative, it can be somebody, a named individual, can get access to that relative, to their loved one, to be a regular visitor and to assist in the care, to maybe come in and help with the food, so long as they follow the safety procedures. So I myself have to have 2 lateral flow tests a week and a PCR test a week. And any of these essential caregivers, they need to come in and be tested each week. If they're coming once a week, it will be on that day before they're able to come in and have access to that person that they are the essential caregiver to. Most homes are now opening up because the government is putting a lot of pressure on them to do so in order to deal with the mental health issues, the loneliness, the isolation of people who've been deprived of this love, of these relationships for so long. If you're actually looking for an organization that is going to come in, maybe a school that's coming in, or finding ways. Again, a lot of volunteers are interested in, people are interested in coming in to volunteer. Denise, I wonder if you have something more to add on this issue. You're muted. You're on mute. Can you unmute yourself?
There we go.
Yeah.
It's all right. I'm busily doing all the answers to the Q&A at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as we know, there is still huge resistance at the moment from a lot of places, whether that is schools having volunteers coming in, even though care homes have been sort of encouraged to open a little bit more widely. They're very much opening to families, but having that interaction isn't so good at the moment. And funny enough, one of the questions I was just answering was from a lady who was saying how her mother is in a retirement apartment and had been an early years teacher previously and loves that interaction with children and has become completely lonely during lockdown, which we all understand. And one of the things I was going to suggest there is, if you are in that position and you're seeing that with your family members, make the move to either the retirement home or to, in this case, the retirement apartments management, and suggest to them that in the first instance, at least they start some sort of interaction, whether that is just by partnering with a school where children will either interact online or by cards, letters or whatever. And gradually then, as we unlock more and more, start doing that face-to-face interaction. But often, I have to say, care homes, or in this case, the apartments management, it's probably the last thing on their mind, and they're not innovative. They tend to do things the way they've always done things. And sometimes it needs a little push and a poke from family members to start this interaction going. So this is where family members do need to speak out, really.
Thank you, Denise. Right.
Oh, can I just mention one thing? The expression "grand friend," I would love to take credit for it. It's actually American. They call theirs their in their intergenerational relationships, they call them grand friends. And actually they have developed, which I think you'd find very interesting, an iPad which works much better for older skin, because the skin ages and it doesn't have the right texture for some of those surfaces, and they call those grandpads.
Oh, wow. That's lovely. Thank you, Judith. Okay, Ron, I think we should move on now.
Okay, thanks very much, Judith. Very well presented.
Thank you.
We move now to James Lynch, one of my former members of the RMT, one of the younger members, I should have said. Recently joined the union and has become a young member of the industry. He won the John Cogger Award as well, which is an achievement in itself within the industry. And I'd like to welcome James to give a presentation about how he sees the younger members cooperating with the older members. James, over to you, mate.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. And just to quickly, first of all, pay tribute to the previous two presentations that have been given. I think it's fantastic work that's being done to combat the somewhat divide between a number of generations. Yeah, so my name's James Lynch, as Ron said, and I am an onboard chef, onboard caterer for a train company, and I am a member of the National Union of Rail, Maritime and Transport. And I am someone who, since leaving school, has been exposed to a working environment, an active environment, which is very diverse in every single sense, not least diverse in generations. And the idea of generations collaborating and working together. So it's something that I've sort of grown up with from going from my late teens into my early 20s and adulthood. So it's something that has played a part in my life for quite a while now, and hence why it's something I support with quite a lot of vigour. And so, I mean, the synopsis of the intergenerational project, if you like, is so unity in generation and intergenerational activity is highly significant because it combines a number of varying skills, which I think in the last year or so, or the last 16 months since the pandemic hit us, has been more vital than ever. As we can see today, we're embracing some technology that this time a couple of years ago we wouldn't have been entirely familiar with. It also intergenerational diversity also builds on varying strengths that members of different generations have to offer. It nurtures understanding and mutual respect. It challenges ageism, as has been pointed out already. It gives an understanding of how and why perceptions of people in different generations may differ. And ultimately, it aims to bring people together, which can often be vital in battling various battles and solving various issues. And that's probably one of the main and most common cases involving intergenerational activity. So my experiences of cases where generations have been united was where we were all trying to deliver the same message or fight the same battle. So, for example, with my experience in activism, myself and a number of fellow activists from my union are fighting for our members, our frontline workers, who always do their utmost to keep as many people safe as possible who use our transport network. And you know, we sort of need to hammer down the messages that we need to get through to our superiors in unity, in collaboration, because unity in generation results in collaboration, intelligence, and willingness to take responsibility and action. So collectively, as one united generation, we have the knowledge and the power, whatever we're fighting for. So sort of touching on my experience a little bit more before I go to more external issues, I've developed a good idea of how diverse in many senses a number of different various workforces are, particularly the frontline workforces. And it sort of embraces many different strengths of different individuals. And I think for people who receive the services that are provided by the front line, I think if I often try to put myself in the position of many of our customers, to use a more economic term, or anyone who is taking advantage of whatever service it is. I think it is often a breath of fresh air to see such a wide range of different individuals being able to deliver what could be seen as quite an essential or vital service. So I do think that that does come into it a little bit. And yeah, I mean, you see various different, I mean, you've got Generation X, those who were born quite recently, you've got the boomers, the traditionalists. And I think it's fair to say one of the few positives of this awful pandemic that's hit us for over a year now is that sort of a lot of families and communities have united across all different generations to work together and look after each other. Relating to the RMT, you've got such a vast number of different activists who perhaps have had their time taken away from them over the past year because they've not been able to do the great work that they do on a daily basis. But as the younger members, we've all had to sort of take over the mantle a little bit on a temporary basis, and that will eventually turn into a more permanent thing. But for the last year, we've had to, organise a number of different Zoom meetings. We've been the ones going into work, perhaps on behalf of a number of different people, because of various rules in terms of shielding and stuff, and more vulnerable people. But it sort of builds up both internally and externally to a lot of people coming together, a lot of different communities coming together to try and look after each other. So just going outside of my area, you look at NHS workers returning to the front line, you know, people who had initially retired returning to the front line. And then on the other side, you've got young people taking responsibility for delivering supplies to the elderly and vulnerable, many more people of all ages embracing new technology, as I said. And this has enabled us to meet virtually with friends and family for both social reasons and for work reasons, you know, to carry on the work that is so essential. And I think what I would like to see post-pandemic is this multi-generational cooperation translate into the workplace. Because age is an aspect of diversity that can often get overlooked in favour of sort of diversity in ethnicity or gender. But it's still very important, especially now that people are delaying retirement and enjoying a second or even third career in the modern day workforce. So I think with that, I mean, it does ask the question, where does that leave younger people in the workforce? Because you know, a lot of younger people are attending university, who often sort of like to prolong their educational career, you know, to perhaps do a PhD or a master's, which in itself is a massive achievement as well. But the general diversity observed in many workplaces today, there's several factors that contribute to it. You know, there's technological advancements, flexible hours. There's a few things. I've sort of gone blank there, but when you look at the 4 generations that are in the workforce, I'd say so Generation X, Millennials, Boomers, I'd say they're probably at their most diverse when on the front line. And I think it's vital that we sort of perhaps carry that over into various different workplaces. And I think there's always continual accessibility when you've got a multi-generational workforce. You've got increased capacity, you've got different skills, different perspectives, different perceptions, increased learning opportunities. And I think it can only be for the greater good that we have a diverse workforce in terms of generations. Sort of going on to activism, there is absolutely no doubt that collaboration of younger and older activists is the best way to get the message across. Like I said earlier, you've got to be in collaboration, you've got to be in unity when achieving what you want to achieve for your cause or your members. There's a number of fantastic activists, including Ron from my union, who have done an incredible amount of work achieving a number of terms, conditions, perks, etc. for all the workers who go out on a daily basis, providing a service that is essential. And then touching on an external issue where supporting the United Generation, which is something I'm quite vocal about, is climate change. There's a number of young people, you may have heard of Lily Platt, a very young Dutch activist, or Greta Thunberg from Sweden, a teenage activist on climate change. And they've sort of given me, they're the people who inspired me to be as vocal as possible. And I think what the message that got across to me was that it didn't really, you don't have to be an established figure within that issue that you're raising, and you don't have to be an adult to be able to be as vocal as they have been. Doesn't matter what age you are. They've confidently come out and voiced how they feel on the issue and have demonstrated supreme leadership within their cultures and communities. But for me, it does beg the question of, I mean, because you could say that it's mainly youth who are promoting this particular role of climate change. And future historians may understandably ask why the current older generation in hindsight perhaps didn't act soon enough. There are a number of possible ways to answer this, but now that we're into the 2020s, we're long into the 21st century now, we know what we're up against and what we need to do to combat climate change. We have the scientific knowledge, we have the international agreements. But I think it's a case of Sorry, just read the message there. Sorry. I think during the COVID-19 pandemic, people have continued to demand climate action and peace throughout 2020, despite the constraints imposed on all of us by the rules we've had to follow, largely keeping us indoors and away from our fellow activists. But I believe that as the world changes and as there is more interdependence and globalization across the world, young people will face many significant challenges such as demographic shifts, inequalities and violence, as well as the climate change issue itself. And that's why young people are so eager to express their views on it. I think 1.2 billion people, so I think it's about 15% of the world's population are aged between 15 to 24. So there's a lot of young people on this planet. And a vast proportion of these young people are in less developed countries where violent conflict is sadly a daily reality. And history tells you that young people with all their potential can go in two directions. One of them is a far more favourable one than the other. They can become productive members of society, sharing all of their potential talent. But what they need is a good education. And a good education comes through inspirational role models, teachers, and that's another way that clear unity in generation and being able to get through to people, whatever their age, is so important, because when you've got good education, good peers, good role models of all different ages, being able to get their messages across to you where they want you to go in your future, that's something that is vital in getting young people to be as active and as vocal and as eager on issues that are so important as a lot of them are becoming. Just looking for the next slide, sorry. So the main message that I'm trying to get across is that whatever the issue, whatever the industry, whatever service you're providing, whoever you're serving, it's always best done when you're exposed to people of all ages, because there are so many different aspects that come together when you're in collaboration with other people of all different ages. I think when you're working on the front line, there's every single little task that is completed is so important. And when you're working in a team, you've got to be able to adapt to, being in collaboration with your teammates. And if you're not sort of adept to sort of familiarizing with people, with workers or friends or colleagues who are from different generations, then I'm not sure that the people you're serving will be served as well, in comparison to whether you're able to collaborate well with people from different generations. And this is why I feel that the workforce really needs to embrace the idea of multi-generational workforces. And I think there is never, I don't think it's ever sort of a foregone conclusion that every work that we will be able to deliver as well as we can, unless there is a great deal of diversity in age groups. I just think that if you look at anything that can unite different people, whether it's a hobby, watching the football, which was mentioned earlier, or whether it's the pride in doing your job, I think anything that can unite two people should be embraced. And one of the best ways to do that is through collaborating within your workforce or within your sort of activist pressure group, because it can really, you never know how much of a role that could play in doing your job to a better standard, serving the people to a higher standard, getting the message across that you're trying to promote. So just to sort of sum up where I'm going with this, there is always room for somebody who from another age group who will always that everyone from different age groups will have different perceptions on various issues, but that's all. I think it's important to embrace how different people from different age groups perceive different issues, and when you do that, you have a much better chance of highlighting every single aspect of every single issue that you're trying to promote. When it comes to the workforce, there is always a fantastic, I mean, if you have a look at the successful vaccine program that this country's overseen, you've got such a diverse group of people volunteering to to serve every single person who's been vaccinated. It all plays a part, and I think that when you consider, if you compare that to people of the same age, of the same perhaps backgrounds and generational upbringings, they might not be as adept with all the different tasks that these people face, ranging from the technology needed to get every single person's name registered on the admin, all the emails that need to be sent out, all these little things. Perhaps it's very important that we get as many people in as possible who are able to there's a problem with my computer's started. Yeah, so I've lost my trail of thought. Sorry, yeah. So it's very important that whenever we're trying to promote any sort of issue, I'm so sorry. I was reading off a script which is just deleted, so that's why I've started rambling. I'm just trying to load it back up, but I'm sort of going off the top of my head now. We need to make sure that whenever in any sort of workforce, whatever when you're serving the greater good of the country and the population, it's important that we promote people of all ages, because what that does is it inspires other people of different ages. If you look at someone who might be on his last legs, or somebody who might still be in school, it shows the capability of every single person and what they're able to do for this country, what they might be able to do for the odd person that might need a hand. And that is the sort of mentality that we need as members of the population, because every single person, whatever their age, whatever their upbringing, however adept they might be with the modern era, with the technology that we've seen develop, every single person can play a part in every single important project. So I think, going back to what I said at the start, the synopsis of the intergenerational project is combining varying skills, which can be done in many different ways, building on various strengths, because we all possess our own strengths that we have to offer, and we've all developed these from our different generational upbringings. We need to nurture the understanding and mutual respect of every single person from all the different generations, and we need to ultimately bring people together. We don't want people to be isolated and across. We want them to feel that they're a part of today, rather than perhaps a part of yesteryear or whatever it is. And there is absolutely no doubt that when we're in unity, we're in collaboration, we do a better job of what we're trying to promote. Thank you.
Done, James. Very well done, mate. Jan?
Yeah, sorry, I had a bit of a technical issue. I was referring to a presentation that I'd made, but then my computer seemed to crash, so I sort of had a bit of a bubble there. Sorry about that, guys.
You'll have to get teaching from your dad, mate.
Live show, James, I'm just going to ask you one question, and then I'm going to move on very quickly. Are there lots of other young people that feel the way you do, or do you come across any resistance to age diversity, either in your work or in your social life?
I'd say it's a bit of both. I think people who I work with and people who I've been lucky enough to meet through my involvement with the RMT they embrace, like me, the idea of diversity between ages. Because I think it's sort of, you sort of do it without thinking about it, because it's all part of the cause. I work with people of all ages. There are some people who are approaching their 70s. There are some people who are my age. but we don't. It's sort of age isn't. You don't even sort of think about if when you meet people, he can't be the same age. We don't even think about what age somebody could be. It's sort of, there's no, that's not an obstacle, if that makes sense, in terms of, you know, embracing the fact and adhering to the fact that this is a teammate of yours, a colleague of yours, a friend of yours. I'd say with my social life, I mean, a lot of my friends are just finishing university now. I left school at 18 and went straight into the workforce. The vast majority of their sort of friends are the same age as them from their universities. I'm not quite the same because I've got many friends and many colleagues who are varying different ages. I think when I tell someone about a friend of mine who might be a completely different age, they seem surprised that I've got friends who are of a different age, and that's the sort of that's what I don't want, because I don't like the idea of, you know, segregation and separation from those around us just because they're a different age to us. So I think that within my social friendship, I think it's important that they learn to adopt and embrace the idea of being able to collaborate and form a friendship or relationship with anybody that they come across and end up having to work with, because at the end of the day, it's not the right way of thinking, that we can only get on with people who had a very similar generational upbringing to ourselves. I think it's very, very important that we embrace the idea of diversity, whatever the situation is, because there's no better method of promoting a cause or delivering a service or whatever it is through unity amongst those who deliver it. And that's in every single sense, including age.
Thanks, Jamie. I mean, as we always say, you know, we were you once and you will be us in the future. So thank you very much. We'll be back to you. There's stuff that I'd like to talk about in terms of climate change, but we're running out of time, so we'll get back to you. But thank you very much.
Thanks,
Ron,
James.
go straight into my bit.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, just very quickly, lot to get through. So yeah, this annual convention has been very different for many reasons, and the obvious one being is we've not been able to meet and enjoy catching up with old friends and making new ones down in Southport. Under normal circumstances, we'd have got together for some music, dancing in the hope of a raffle prize, but you know, not to be this year. So even though our programme this year has been somewhat less than the norm, we know what we've done has been high quality. And how do we know that? Well, from the excellent feedback we get, not just from those members in NPC, but from others who join our webinars from across the world. We've had people from France and other places join us, but also from our speakers too. So what we heard about in our rallies, well, on the 8th of June, we heard about NHS digital collection. Very few people knew about it then and still don't know much about it. The NPC is one of 5 organisations working with Foxglove to try and get the government to be accountable and to get patients told about what's happening and answer the questions that we've asked you, please. Ageism and Discrimination from Jackie Killeen, Commissioner for Equality and Human Rights. We've written to get more information on the complexities of the law around ageism and discrimination, particularly to enable us to raise a high-profile campaign on digital exclusion. And Gail Cartmel, current president of TUC, gave us some welcome news that the NPC and TUC are on the same page with pensions in care, and we'll follow that up as we go along. Our second session on pensions on the 18th of June, we heard from Daniela Jenkins, the Women's Budget Group, who gave us a history of pensions and the various ways in which women have been affected. Jack Jones, pension officer for TUC, spoke about older workers, how they're affected by being unable to work through ill health, the triple lock, defending universal pension entitlements, and a campaign against the increase in state pension age. Bob Pinkerton, who is a member of the NPC Pensions and Income Working Party, who showed us just how much those having to work longer are losing and how much the government gains from increasing state pension age. And his figures show us that the state pension is affordable at a decent level for everyone. Session 3 was about NHS and care. And we heard from John Bosco Werbo from We Own It on the NHS reform bill and the dangers posed to the NHS through increased privatisation. Professor Michael Marmot, who told us that the health of the nation has been affected by continued austerity, cuts to services, and that as a nation, we entered the pandemic in poorer health. He believes that as a nation, there's enough money to go around and to improve lives. Tracy Jarrett, Lewisham Pensioners Forum, on the impact of COVID on access to services for their minority elders, the vaccines, scams, digital exclusion, and the work of the forum is doing to challenge the barriers. And she showed how communities and groups come together as we emerge from the pandemic is going to be crucial. And I think that's a message that we've also heard today. I mean, our priority as an NPC is older people, but we do know that what we gain and lose now affects our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. So from today, we heard from Denise, United for All Ages. It's not just about young and old, it's about across the generations. It's about a lack of connection and trust because of age segregation and the mutual benefits that are enormous around confidence, skills in communications, well-being, the unique selling points of all those things. From Judith, it just shows how coming together gives both generations a benefit and breaking down the barriers and equal value for care workers and nursery staff. That is so important. And of course, choices for people. And just now, James, talking about combining the variety of skills, the diversity of building on different strengths and knowledge, perceptions. And it's vital to bring people together. I think in this climate that we have now, coming together to get a stronger voice is going to be the only way to combat things that are going to go wrong after we come out of the pandemic. Multi-generational workplaces are really, really something now that we'll be thinking about as we go into our review, and we hope that people will join us in that review of the organisation. So finally, I want to thank everyone who's put aside the time to register for our webinars, to Bev and Jonathan, who worked so hard setting them up, finding the speakers and generally keeping myself and Ron up to speed. We couldn't do these things without them. To all our speakers, we cannot thank you enough for the time you give freely to inform, support and help take the NPC forward. I'm going to hand back now to our President, Ron Douglas, to introduce our last speaker for the event. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you, Jen. To finish the webinar and our 2021 virtual annual conference, we have someone who is making waves across the age group. Please welcome Rapping Nana Panda, Joy France, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi. Yes, I'm Joy, and I've got a strange story to tell you. But before I start, I have to do a little bit about me. I grew up as the most quiet, shy child you would ever know. I hated speaking to people and wanted to be invisible. And then in my mid-50s, I discovered performance poetry and I found my voice and I've been using it ever since. But what I want to talk to you about now is I've done lots and lots of projects bringing diverse communities together or strengthening communities or creating new ones. But this is what I accidentally fell into. I've become a battle rapper. And I've got to explain a little bit about battle rap because not everybody will have known about it. It's essentially literally a battle, usually against two young guys, a battle of performance and rap in a crowded, testosterone-fueled, crazy. It's Yeah, it's hard to explain it in words. But basically, I went into it because I wanted to go in and show the world that I believed was everything I hated: racist, sexist, homophobic, gross. And I wanted to show them that somebody like me could give them a run for their money and be okay. But I was terrified. Anyway, I did do it. But what I'm going to do is just do a little bit of rap at this point, just to give you an idea. So no, rap doesn't always have to be aggressive. It can also be funny. So I've taken some of the bars, some of the lines out of my first battles and turned it into a piece. Now, if you're easily offended, I'd go and just make a brew for 1 minute. It's literally 1 minute, or put your fingers in your ears. But imagine the poor lad's face when I said some of these words to him. Okay. You're a jumped up pup, a wannabe, you want the words and the moves of Muhammad Ali, but you sting like a butterfly, float like a bee, you can't touch me, I'm Joy and you're just a naughty little boy. You say you're going to be famous, drive a bikini car? I say, no, you're more pot noodle, not beluga caviar, and megabus will always be a ride, and besides that, will your hide nationwide. Because I'm no longer a battle rap virgin, and I'm coming at you like a tree surgeon, not silly scissor hands from Tim Burton, no more like Chainsaw Massacre meets Mrs. Merton. Because I'm a high-speed train, you're the late-night replacement bus. Difference between you notice, I've got guts and you make a fuss over paper cuts. I'm rich roasted coffee, you're gold blend, and it's me that's got the balls and you that's the bell end. Because I'm stronger than the Great Wall of China, so come on, take a swipe like you do on Tinder or use Grindr. If you still think you're hard, here's a reminder. I've pushed a 10-pound child out of my vagina and I've just destroyed you by putting that image inside you. Okay, there's no more swearing, no more whatever. You can take your fingers out of your ears now. But essentially, I went to dispel some stereotypes to break down, and then I was going to run. But what happened was there was a documentary crew filming me aging differently, and so they made a documentary, Northern Heart Films. In fact, it's just been shown last night on the big screen in home in Manchester. Very excited. Anyway, so it went up on YouTube, so I couldn't run away and hide. And I looked at all the comments, and it was things like "Joy is a goat," and completely confusing me, which stands for greatest of all time, which I wasn't, but they were giving me compliments. And really that should have been the end of it. But what happened is I've discovered that away from the battles, it is a beautiful, gentle, kind world where men, in particular young men, talk about the mental health, support each other, and they have embraced me into their world completely. Yeah, they don't humour me. I'm just treated like one of them. And I've had 5 battles altogether. I've been over in Dublin on Rapid's Full over there. And that makes me an international battle rapper. But to put this into context, I am the only person in the world like me who does it. I'm going to show you some photos. Have you got the photos ready to show? Just give me 2 seconds. That's probably the oldest guy in battle rap. He's one of the oldest. He's called Hulk, and that's me battling him in Leeds. Have you got the next one? They're photos of the guy who I said those early bars to. That was his reaction, some of his facial. He just didn't know where to put himself. And then the next one, please. These should just be a couple of photos of me at an event, just to try and put it into context. Thanks. But the main thing is, what I've found in there is the whole scene. When I went to Ireland, some people went who were 60s and the 70s to come and watch me, you know, and I'm beginning to sort of soften the edges of it a little bit and get other people into battle rap who you never normally would. Sorry, I'm in Manchester, there's a siren going past, but that's fine. And I've got genuine friends. I mean, genuine friends of different generations. And I used to have friends called Janice and Linda and things like that. And now I've got Maddo and Scully the Mad Hat and Bacon and things like that. And it's so supportive. It's just a magical world. So what I decided to do is me and Scully the Mad Hat are going to do our own documentary. We're working on it at the moment, trying to show the magic that is there, the genuine, you know, looks nothing like me. He's literally got a skull tattoo on his face. And you know, when he picks my bag up for me, people think he's robbing me. But we've got genuinely close friends. And it's such a beautiful coming together And it wasn't anything I actually planned. I literally just wanted to go and do it once and run away and hide. And I just think the beauty when when those barriers aren't there, it benefits everybody around. I've met lots of their kids, and oh, it's just so lovely. I did a TEDx talk about it, so if you want to actually watch a clean version of what actually I did, that's up there, how I became the rapping man of Panda. But essentially what I want to do is just finish off with two things. One is I've got a battle coming up on the 31st in Manchester against a 22-year-old, I think he's 22, from Dublin. So if anybody wants to experience it, get in touch and come along. And then the other thing, I'm going to finish with a spoken piece that will just fill the time, that echoes a lot of the things that have been said before by other people. So basically, I love Aquazumba. And I was at an Aquazumba class, and this young woman comes in, and she looked horrified at all these old people bodies and, you know, being there. So I wrote a piece in her voice, and then I'll just say one last thing and then I'll wind up. So in her voice, Aquazumba. In they inch, worn bodies flinch, the water's cold and they're old. Spent, bent back, sticks stacked, a hobble of women's bodies exposed in ill-fitting causes. White bits normally covered by Cardi's glare, and I wonder what on earth I'm doing there. I'm used to exuberant instructors and pounding push myself mantras, and I'm out of place amongst these empty shells. Then the music starts, and ironically, it's Pharrell's Happy. Then with no instruction or warning, they follow her movement, and it's transforming. Heads are high, they're grinning, they're beginning to look happy. The water's dipping, splashing, stripping off decades, and in sync they become a beautiful backdrop of Busby Berkeley babes. Then the tempo changes. Salsa, boom, boom, booms, and they hit each beat. For they are a flock of white-haired jouncers. Some are floating twig-stick dancers. One leaps high and her belly bounces. The water laps. Another's flappy breasts slap on the surface like fish on a marble slab. Schlap, schlap. And here in sisterhood and song, I see the joy of the live long. And I give in. I join in. I start dancing like I did as a child. And in our liquid thrustings we are what all women should be. Vibrant and wild. Abandonment is our heart. Beat, beat, beat. Drum, beat, beat, beat. We are samba, merengue, mamba, soca. We turn like otters and tap like ginger. We are salmon leaping torso twisters. And as the music eases, it's with us waving and swaying and singing with all our might. Don't worry about a thing, because in that moment, everything is all right. A last note, a prick of hush, and they leave the pool in a chattering tide of buzz. And me, I want to hear them say, come join us. Don't be alone. We'll all go skip all the way home. Right, thank you. I think the message I want to leave is this that I've done isn't about me. It's not it is my story, but it's about everybody and what happens when you see things a little bit different, you take risks, and yeah, you enjoy getting older. Right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Joy. What a pleasant change to have, yeah. Very good. Well, that brings us to the end of the 2021 annual conference, and clearly it's been different but enjoyable. I'm sure many people have enjoyed the presentations, the speakers, and the way they presented themselves and answered the questions. Those that were not been answered, as we've said, will be answered in due course. And all the best to you, and keep up the good work, James, in the union, mate, and to all the other people that's doing different aspects in the world. Good luck to you, and keep up the good work. Thanks very much, and thanks for coming.